This is lines 254 to 58. In the first line, actually first sentence, I've added two ests, one to fatus and the second to repulsum, and that's because with the conjunction que here at the end of tellum, and then the et in the third line, 546, Virgil's using those conjunctions to connect two clauses, so to connect two verbs. But the first verb in each of those series looks like participle, but he intends you to read it as a verb. So, thus the old man spoke. Fatus est is deponent. Thus the old man spoke. Then the que is joining fatus to coniacate, and hurled. Imbelle means unwarlike, a sort of a futile spear without force, or without effect, maybe. That's a less literal translation of ictu, but that's the idea there. A spear which, so quod here is nominative. It's antecedent. The reason it's neuter is because it's referring to the tellum. So a spear which was pushed back with a bronze clanging. Rauco, it's with noisy bronze. And that's just the sound the spear makes when it hits the shield. And it hung uselessly. Notice there, nequiquam is an adverb that Virgil used in his initial description of Priam. This is what you read in English. We have not translated it, where he describes Priam strapping on all his weapons, and it describes him as a feeble old man, and emphasizes again and again in the passage how unprepared for war Priam is. And then in the middle, the passage you read last time, you get what I think is a wonderful, strong speech from this guy that you were expecting to be feeble and weak, and he really, in my opinion, his speech to Pyrrhus is incredibly powerful, which is an interesting distinction from the picture of him that Virgil initially paints in this book. So, and it hung uselessly, nequiquam, sumo umbone, from the top of the knob of the shield. Clipei is genitive. Then cui here is that linking relative, and the reason I know it is because it's a relative pronoun and it starts a clause. So instead of saying to whom Pyrrhus, and here you have to supply the verb, to whom Pyrrhus said, that leaves you with a fragment, and so we're going to switch cui to ei. To him, namely to Priam, Pyrrhus said, and you might find a stronger word than dixit, Pyrrhus snarled or something like that. Therefore, and I would actually just ignore that, because in English, therefore, in my opinion, so kills the mood of this sentence. I just ignore it. But if you want to translate it, that's what it means. You will refereres, and this here, Virgil, as Farr notes, is using the future as with imperative effect. So you will report these things, and you will go as a messenger. Nuntius is nominative, but the verbs, as you see, are second person. And so that's in apposition to the understood subject to, so you will go as a messenger. Farr notes that this is a device called hysteron proteron, which is a reversal of the natural order of things. So ideally, or sort of what you would expect is you will go and you will tell these things, but instead Virgil switches the order. Okay, so you will report these things and you will go as a messenger. Pelladai genitori is dative, so to my father, and then Pelladai means descendant of Peleus. And so this means to Achilles. Achilles, of course, is dead, and so this is a subtle way, well, it's not that subtle, of Pyrrhus saying, Priam, I'm about to kill you. So then we get this sarcasm. Memento's an imperative. so it has no, you notice there's no nominative here. So remember to tell, memento here takes a complementary infinitive or an objective infinitive. You could read it either way, but you could explain it either way, but it says, remember to tell Illy to that man. And Illy is referring to Achilles. So remember to tell him, mea tristia facta. And here's where we get the heavy sarcasm, my sad deeds. You can almost see him sort of putting his lip out and pouting. Remember to tell him my sad deeds. And then the quay here is connecting my sad deeds to, awful Neoptolemus. Neoptolemus is another name for Pyrrhus. The idea here, I think you need to supply a few extra words. It's sort of, the sense here is, remember to tell him how dreadful my deeds are and how degenerate Neoptolemus is. Because as you'll recall, in the speech prior, when Priam spoke to Pyrrhus, he said, you're nothing like your father, who at least had a little bit of honor. Nunc morere. Morere is an imperative. Deponent imperative looks like an infinitive, but it's not. Now die. Decanes modifies Pyrrhus, and trementem and lapsantam tem modify understood Priam. So Pyrrhus saying this, hoc is accusative. It's the direct object of the participle. Saying this, he dragged the man, and you have to understand or supply either a pronoun or noun there. So he dragged Priam, or the king, or the man, trembling. Altaria ad ipsa is a prepositional phrase, to the very altar. And I think I'm going to change the order. I think I would say he dragged to the very altar Priam, trembling, and this et is connecting the two participles, trembling and slipping in all the blood of his son. So I changed multo to all because it sounds awkward to say slipping in much blood of the son. And in this sentence, you notice a couple of things. Pyrrhus is about to kill Priam at the very altar, which is, the most sacred place in the house. And not only is he going to slaughter him at the altar in his own home, but he's poor Priam has just watched his son be murdered in front of him at that same altar, and he's slipping in his own son's blood. And so we get two notes here about just how violent and dishonorable a slaughter this is. Okay, so I'll do this whole sentence. So Pyrrhus, saying this, dragged to the very altar the king, or Priam, trembling and slipping in all the blood of his son. Then the quay on implicuit is connecting implicuit to troxa. It's connecting two clauses. And he grabbed or twisted his hair. So Pyrrhus grabbed Priam's hair, Liwa, with his left hand and with his right. So the quay here is joining clauses again, the two verbs. And with his right, he brought out, and then coruscum ensem is a flashing sword. And when we first met Pyrrhus, and you read this in English, but we didn't translate it, Virgil talks about how flashy he is. And the idea is that his armor is very shining and bright. So that's why it's a shining sword. He's referring back to that initial description. So he brought out with his right hand a flashing or shining sword, and the ak is connecting extulit to obdidit, and he buried the sword. So you read the direct object twice. He buried the sword in Priam's side, and I'm just supplying Priam's just to make it clear who's dying and who's being killed. So he buried it in Priam's side. This is a dative of direction. Tenos is a preposition that I'm not sure we've seen before. and it takes an ablative. So he buried it in his side up to the hilt. Okay, Haec Finis. This was the end of the fates of Priam. This death, maybe for Exitus, his final exit, this death found, and I am not literal with bring, bear, carry, or relate for Tulit, which comes from Pharaoh, because I just don't like any of those translations. So I've always just used found. So this death found that man or that king. Again, it's referring to Priam. There's sorte, there's the fate element that we've talked about. That's on the Epic Fail article, the sortes question. This idea that certain things happen by chance or by destiny is a theme in this epic. So this death found him by fate, and then videntem is what you take next because it's a participle modifying illum, seeing, and then what I've underlined in green, those things are the direct object of this participle. And the et here is connecting Troiam and Kensam to Prolapsa Pergama. So this death found that man by fate, seeing Troy burned and Pergama fallen. And then the Superbum Regnatorum is in apposition to Illum Videntem once. Sorry, quondam means once. The proud, Superbum Regnatorum, the proud ruler of Asia, and he's proud because of, and I'm going to try to format this in a meaningful way. He's proud because of so many people and so much land. The tot modifies populis terrisque, and the que on the end of terris is connecting populis to terris. So once the ruler of Asia, proud with or because of all his or so many people and so much land. Last sentence. Ingens truncus is the subject. A huge body lies on the shore, the head torn from the shoulders, perfect passive participle, and a body without a name. And that, you'll see from Farr's note, a contemporary Roman reader would have understood this as a reference to the fate of Pompey the Great.